Veterans Memorial Tollway to DeSable Lakeshore Drive. Outbound 27 minutes with delays First Avenue to the Tri-State. Ryan is 24 minutes from 95th to downtown. Lakeshore Drive is congested at Grant Park. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Jim, thank you. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast. Sunny and pleasant. High of 84 today. Currently 69 degrees. Your next news update is at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, Chicago Tribune editorial page editor, formerly, Kristen McQuarrie. And we're updating a story we told you about earlier this morning. Governor Pritzker will hold a press conference this afternoon at which he will reportedly issue an executive order requiring mask wearing in all K through 12 schools. Wait for it. Public and private. Public and private. Here's a guy who feels totally insulated from political competition, and probably rightly so.
Probably is. I mean, this is just infuriating because it's a huge overstep on local governments being elected school boards and elected school boards being able to decide for themselves what is best for their school. Now he's going to reach his hand into the private school system where parents send their kids specifically to get away from all of these mandates that come from state government. Private schools that did an excellent job last year at keeping in-person learning while CPS and CTU and other teachers' unions fought each other like dogs and cats and didn't care a hoot about kids who sat home and didn't learn. Private schools actually got kids in the classroom. Teachers prepared for the fall by putting up plexiglass, setting up systems in place, having kids get their temperatures checked, putting them in cohorts. And guess what? It worked. And now they're going to be punished for doing a good job. And now the governor is going to issue by executive order, as if we're still in a major emergency, which we are not. He's going to overstep the legislature, that entire branch, and try to institute forced mask wearing even in private schools. This should be fought.
Well, it's the Illinois that we chose, including some private schools that accepted the premise of the COVIDians to their detriment. And once you start accepting false premises, you get to false conclusions in bad places. And so, yeah, things were different last year than they are this year. But look at all we know about what we did last year. McKinsey studies, Brown University studies about the retardation in children's and young adults' intellectual and social advancement in schools, how far they've fallen behind, not to mention the deaths of despair and the incidence of reporting of mental health issues and so on.
The goalposts just keep moving.
And
because a lot of kids, especially for high school, a lot of these kids are getting vaccinated. Parents are bringing their teens to get vaccinated. You follow all the rules, do everything you're supposed to do, and they're still going to require your kid to wear a mask all day at school and possibly sports too. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the sports outside, I mean, that's just another category of insanity. That's like 1 degree out on the risk plane with respect to the insanity of this all. But again, with respect to mask wearing in school, you know, the regression in children's education, yeah, part of it is Zoom learning. The other part of it is, particularly younger kids, the ability to concentrate when you're masked up for 8 hours a day in school. Mm-hmm. And again, the basis, the science and the data. Okay, for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Jeremy Adams. He's a award-winning high school and college poli-sci teacher from Bakersfield, California, and the author of the just-released book, Hallowed Out, a warning about America's next generation. Better listen up. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Christian. I got to tell you, Illinois sounds a lot like California these days.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, in all the bad ways.
Yeah. You do not want to be emulating Illinois.
Except we don't have a chance to recall our governor right now. At least you guys have that going for you.
That is true. That is true. But sadly, it sounds to me like Chicago and Illinois schools are going to look a lot like California schools, which sadly is going to look a lot like last year. And I got to tell you, as somebody who's in the trenches of the American classroom, the last 16 months has been really, really difficult on young Americans. And frankly, I wrote Hollowed Out before all of this began because, you know, a lot of these really big books in America that are ambitious and claiming that there's a huge problem coming our way are written by famous people. I'm not famous. I'm just a classroom teacher. But I'll tell you, I have a front row seat to American decline in a way that nobody else does.
Well, describe what you're seeing.
Well, just to be perfectly blunt, you see a lot of young people who live their lives completely untethered to adult values, adult responsibilities, adult role models. You had young people on their devices 9 or 10 hours a day before the pandemic. And what does that mean? Well, that means that they're not dating, they're not reading books, they don't go to football games and movies the way that you and I used to. They don't know a lot about religion. They have awful mental health. You look at rates of suicide, self-harm. They are the least patriotic generation in American history. The desire for marriage and family is in free fall. Again, all of these things were before the pandemic, and I completely agree with what you're saying. These problems are amplified and accelerated in the wake of COVID-19, and we have got to get these kids back to a sense of normalcy to get them back on track so they don't continue to be hollowed out.
We even have a problem, and I'm sure this is not just in Chicago, but as I was reading about your book, Hollowed Out, our crime problem and juvenile carjackings and all of these things that have been amplified during the pandemic are fueled often by kids being on their cell phones, seeing something on
Yes.
Snapchat, get an argument that escalates and escalates. And it just creates a whole chain reaction of numbness for kids about life and weaponry and how they react to revenge type situations. It has contributed substantially to just an out of control crime problem here in Chicago.
Well, first of all, my best friend from college lives in Chicago. So I follow Chicago news quite a bit, hear about it quite a bit. But Christian, you used the word numbness, and numbness is exactly right. You know, young people, when they are scrolling, when they're on their phones, you know, they're isolated. This is the loneliest generation in American history. Typically, it is the elderly who are the loneliest. It's actually young people today. And why is that? That's because they use their phones for coping. One of the weird things to me, and you guys probably find it weird as well, is it used to be when I was growing up, or even when I was a younger teacher, you know, you would go to teenage gatherings and they would be loud. They would be rowdy. Kids would be talking, gossiping, flirting. You go into a classroom nowadays, especially in the wake of what we've done, radio silence. The kids, the moment they don't have anything to do, they don't talk, they don't run around, they literally turn on their phones and they just start scrolling or watching video after algorithmically produced video. My teenage daughters, we have these birthday parties for them, and I expect, the kids to be, kind of loud and boisterous. Again, you walk into a room with teenagers and it's silent. So, the whole point of Hollowed Out is that the things that typically give our lives meaning, the things that we connect to, that give us happiness and joy, and what the ancient philosophers called the good life, family, faith, country, community, friendship, all of this connective tissue is not there for our young people, which explains why rates of suicide and self-harm, and the word I hear all the time, Kristen, all the time in the classroom from young people is anxiety. They are constantly anxious, and that goes to the heart of the numbness you are describing. When you don't have adults in your life, when you don't have traditional values being modeled, you turn to something else, and that's where the numbness and the despair and the hollowing out comes from.
Right, and this is basically what needs to be put between the eyes of parents and adults, and because otherwise, I don't know how you fill the void that you're describing. I mean, the kids aren't going to fill it for themselves. They don't know how to fill it. And so if it's not coming from the home, it's not coming from the classroom because, I assume, like in Chicago, 80%, 90%, 95% of your fellow union members are, dyed-in-the-wool Democrat socialists walking in lockstep with Gavin Newsom and the other and COVIDians and Randy Weingarten and that whole crew. And so where else does it come from? They have no exposure to it. And so where do they get the exposure? Unless you start, I don't know, really confronting parents and those who have material responsibility for part of the time over young people.
Dan, that's exactly right. One of the questions I get a lot is, well, if they're hollowed out, then what's the solution? And the number one solution is the adults in our society have got to start adulting again. Again, people who are not in the classroom, I think, are surprised because I'm shocked the extent to which young people are just simply not around other adults. People will say sometimes, when you write a big book like this, you wonder, well, what's going to be the knock? What are people probably on the left going to say about it? And what they're going to say is, well, this is just another traditional cranky curmudgeon who doesn't like young people. First of all, I'm too young to be a curmudgeon. I just want to say that. I'm not too, I'm way too young to be a crank.
You sound 23. You sound 23 years old.
Well, God bless you, Kristen, for saying that. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, there is something unique about this generation of hollowed out young people, and that is that young people today have achieved something that no other generation in the history of our species has ever achieved, and it is hollowing out. And you know what that is? Every young generation would love to have a room in their house where there are no adult eyes, no adult values, no adult consequences, where they can say and do whatever they want. There's an important part of my book in Hallowed Out where I talk about this a dean, I think in Arkansas, and he said to the parents of his community, I confiscate these phones all the time. And do you know what your 13 to 18-year-olds are watching? Constant vulgarity, constant pornography, constant violence, constant values and images that are affecting them. Now, here's the thing. Our young people, Dan is right, they are going to get their values from somewhere. They're going to absorb a worldview which looks at traditional values and looks at their country in some way. And if the adults aren't going to do it, if the people who know what wisdom and being, a patriotic American, if we're not going to step up and do it for them, they're going to get it in this toxic cauldron of crap called social media. I mean, people ask me all the time, because I teach political science, why do young people dislike this country so much? Because they spend hours a day consuming content that teaches them how awful it is. There is no counter narrative. So when you don't know much, and when what you do know is bad, that's why 1 out of 5 millennials say they see the flag as a symbol of hate. That's why 18 to 29-year-olds have a more positive view of socialism than capitalism, is because the adults have left the building.
So true. Jeremy Adams, award-winning high school and college political science teacher from Bakersfield, California. Pick up the book, Hollowed Out, A Warning About America's Next Generation. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thank you. I hope it does well. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too. And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Hey everybody, Jay Farner here, CEO of Rocket Mortgage and Rocket Companies. Last year we saw historically low mortgage interest rates. In fact, over 1 million homeowners took advantage of refinancing or